Yeah, so hello to the track 2. The next talk we'll have here will be about building a collaborative, yeah, not a native speaker, collaborative news platform with Plone. And it will be presented by Érico Andrei. Please note that we will have questions, all the questions taken to Jitsi afterwards. So please just put them into the Slido on the right of your window next to the video. So then go ahead and have fun.
First, thank you, Janina. And here we go. Let's talk about building a collaborative news platform with Plone. First of all, I'm Érico Andrei. Most of you know me or saw my name in one of the previous talks. I'm a Brazilian living in Berlin. I've been working with open source for quite a long time. I'm a fellow of the Python Software Foundation, and I'm one of the 7 members of the Plone Foundation board. In the past, I worked for Microsoft, so every time Timo mentions Microsoft, it hurts me. Thank you, Timo. I worked in many other companies, including Simples Consultoria, that was the main provider of Plone solutions in Brazil, and also on Rocket Internet, where I was CTO for 2 different companies there. And right now, I work at Pendact. Pendact is a collaborative news platform. It's the idea of facts are more important than opinion when you're forming your own opinion. It was launched in March of 2020. It's still in beta. We are still evolving the platform, and we've got some pretty good results. But first, I would like to talk about my lovely co-founders. I have Ashley Winker. It's our design wizard. She's amazing. She lives in Vienna. We have Christopher Young. That's the genius behind the idea. We worked together in a previous company, and he basically had the idea of Pendact. He's also based here in Berlin. And I'm Érico, CTO, and I'm based in Berlin most of the time. You can follow me by the footer on the Pendact. Usually I change to where I am at the moment, either Brasilia, São Paulo, or locally Sorrento next year, right? So planning Pendact, the idea was to build a too long didn't read news platform because we consume too much news and we want to be informed, but not necessarily we want to read every op-ed, every opinion article on the New York Times about something. We want to understand first and then, okay, which sources for this information, then click one and then go analyze. The idea is that short cards are better than articles for you to get this first idea. And of course, like the Wikipedia, you go to the primary source from there. The idea is to have the cards submitted by our community members. We call them contributors. The card should include metadata that allows us to kind of cross-reference them. So I want to know everything about Joe Biden. I click and I see a list of everything that was written about him. And users can follow tags, people, organizations, locations, so on to form their own personal feed. And a recent idea, but it's important to us, for each new card, we plant a tree. So you submit a card, it's published, we plant a tree. Some of the technical requirements, we needed a collaborative workflow. This is something that after working for years with content management, you know workflow is important. Workflow is the king. You need to have permissions for people to submit their cards and other people to review the cards and eventually a third group of people to schedule and publish the cards and so on and so forth. Also, the whole permission control to set who can do what and when. And we needed a platform that would help us to leverage metadata and categorization as much as possible. Of course, it needed to be SEO friendly because even though we are a startup in Berlin, we do not have like a rocket size truck of money to invest in search engine marketing. So we expect our organic growth so SEO is really important for us. And of course, it needs to be open source. We truly believe that being transparent, being in the open is the best way to go. So Pendex Stack. First thing, content management. We decided for Plone for many reasons. One of them, of course, I am the CTO. I'm going with something that's familiar, but Plone was not actually my first choice. In the beginning, I decided to question my own knowledge about CMS and say, okay, how hard would it be if I built something with pyramid instead of going with a full Plone? And I consider Substance D and I consider Koti. And at some point, I was considering developing the simple API on Pyramid itself. But in the end, when I start adding some features that would appear, it became obvious that instead of expending a lot of time building the solution, we could go have something really fast, go to market with Plone, because Plone brings most of the features we wanted out of the box. And what was not there, we were able to adapt instead of building from scratch. And of course, then using my own experience back in Brazil, back with Simples Consultoria, we had many news portals as our customers, as our clients. So it basically means that we were able to build news portals with Plone easily. And of course, this is a very friendly community. It's easy to ask stuff and get answers. And we have really smart people in here, including Matthew Wilkes that just published a book. The book should be there. I completely messed up, but it's a really good book about Python, so you can go there and take a look. Also, I decided that if we were going to do lots of metadata and lots of categorization, we should try to find an automatic way of tagging stuff, right? Not only the hashtags or the tags in Plone subject, but also specific categories. So we decided to approach DBpedia. They have the solution called Spotlight. It's a REST API service, a REST API that you basically put a text in there and it gives you back with some of the markings and basically annotating the original content, right? And this is something I wanted to play with for a long time, since a group of friends did that in 2014 or 13 in Brazil for global.com. And that was an idea that was in the back of my head, so we went for it. We use SparkQL to query DBpedia to also get the about and abstract for everything we tag our content with. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the future. And we have a bit of everything else. And in here, I start with Cloudflare, Nginx, Varnish, AJ Proxy, and Ansible. And I start with a screenshot of Jair Bolsonaro, the Brazilian president. Not because I'm Brazilian, but mostly because this card brought us the biggest Reddit effect so far. We had, in a few hours after submission, between 120 and 200,000 different users. So imagine we have our amount of users and then we publish this and it goes to the front page, it goes skyrocket. And I found out only the next day when I was looking at the Google Analytics. We have all sorts of monitoring, but in the end, nothing special happened because with Cloudflare doing the static resources caching, and with Varnish doing the caching for everything that's dynamic, it was really easy to support the amount of new users coming to us. We actually survived already 12 different Reddit effects. This was the biggest one, but we had one about the Belgian government offering free train rides for their citizens to kind of bring back tourism, internal tourism to Belgium. And we got also a few tens of thousands users into the site. We use Thumbor to generate all the images and the scaling of images. Thumbor is an open source platform. I was expecting a hard time integrating that with Plone, but it was actually replacing one of the browser views. So it's adding like a bunch of code, solve the problem really easy without having to integrate too much. We have Sentry, Mailgun, EFTTT, and Zapier to, when we publish something, we push everywhere else. And now we have DeepL, Scrapping Hub, and archive.org. I'm going to talk a bit more about that when I talk about a new service we implemented. So building Pendact, toolset and add-ons. First things first, I've been developing with Python 3 since I left Simples Custodia back in end of 2014. So every single thing I developed after in my career was based on Python 3. I use other languages like PHP and Ruby and a lot of JavaScript, but every time I came back to Python was Python 3. So Pyramid with Python 3 and FastAPI with Python 3 and so on and so forth. Even a bit of Guillotina with Python 3. So I got used to Python 3. And I admit that I love f-strings. They solve a problem for me because every time I need to do string interpolation, f-strings, it's basically the way to go instead of doing the old dot format and so on and so forth. I use a lot of type hints, mostly because it's a way for me to understand what I'm doing with my code. So every time I'm writing, I'm putting type hints in there, like from moment zero. And another thing I start using a lot is data classes, right? I use data classes as a kind of a contract between functions and systems. So it's for me, it was a better way than just adding the passing, returning dictionaries everywhere. It's simple, and of course, as I use PyCharm, it speed up a lot development and avoids a lot of errors. Important, type hints are not available for Plone, right? So one of the things I did was to create a facade of the Plone API, adding some new methods for me to be used by my company. And for all the methods I need to change, I added type hints. So for instance, to implement the create user using UID as the user ID, Plone API does not do that by default, even though REST API does and the login form does. So I had to refactor the Plone API, implemented something there. And for that function, for that method, I have type hints indicating that, okay, it's going to return you a member data. So it becomes easier for me to work. And of course, Black, I sort the code analysis and so on and so forth, and many Flake 8 plugins, thanks to Nate Zupan and to Gil Forcada for doing that. When it comes to Plone add-ons, I'm going to start with the easy ones. Collect C3C data grid field to deal with many sources for one content. It could be basically a JSON field and implement a JSON, saving as JSON, like Voto saves the blocks information as JSON, but I wanted to give people the ability to edit easily, and I did not want to write my own implementation of a widget. So data group field, I use collective sentry, and I believe Andreas Young worked on that. Thank you. I use content rules like that was something I developed a few years back for a previous company I worked. That basically every time someone does any action, it sends information back to Slack. This is something that for me is quite important because most of my day I spend on Slack. So, okay, we have a new user or we have a new submission, it's easier to reach me there. And we have super.plone. That's like one of the hidden gems of the Plone community and the Zope community, because there's the Zope version of it. And I thank Érico for giving a talk a long time ago in the Plone conference in Brasilia about that. And that talk kind of stayed in the back of my mind. And a few months ago, I said, okay, we need to implement something. And I was close to implement a small API with pyramids. And then, okay, maybe it's an overkill. I implemented the same thing using Super inside Plone. Super. Content types, we use the default ones. Folder, documents, most for content page like content guidelines, about us, and so on and so forth. Folder to organize some things. But image and collection. Collection we use for grouping some of the content together. But we also use something called category that it's folderish with a collection behavior with some same defaults. So every time you click, for instance, regional news, and then you'll see a listing of everything that's regional news. And then you click on regional news Americas, and then everything that's Americas. So we organize the content inside categories and subcategories, and we have a collection listing all of them. Besides that, we implement the content type that's the card, that's basically a news item with a behavior that implement the other categorization. And adapting Plone, we went for, okay, we know how Plone works, so how to play with it. So first thing, we have the concept of my feed. When you go and follow some content, let me, you go and, okay, I want to follow, for instance, news from regional news, or specifically from America, specifically from South America. I want all South American news, so you go there and follow. We're talking a bit more about that. And then we have a list of content. So the dashboard was turned into my feed. We have the contributor profile, basically leveraging the logic from author page. And we adapted the image and scale browser views to support proxying to Thumbor. Content rules, we have actions for Slack, email, and webhooks. We adapted a bit of those. And we added one trigger, that's when a principal is added or removed from a group. Because every time I create a new subcategory, I want to create a group of contributors that can submit something there, and also editors that can review content there. Besides that, new features, we have aggregator pages. As I said, we added the support for the categorization using DBpedia. And with that, we added some additional fields. We added a people, location, and organization. So for instance, this card you see in your screen, Qantas lays off 2,000 more employees. When someone submitted that, when Charlie David submitted that, I made a call to DBpedia saying, oh, this is the content you need to tag. And he came back saying, oh, organization, Qantas, location, Australia. People involved, if there's someone prominent in here, it would be tagged and grouped in there, right? And we have pages for each one of those categorizations. So you see in here, this is actually pendeck.com/organizations/cantas, right? And we are going to have the same for Joe Biden and so on. And the name that appears there, it's one-to-one with the name that appears on the Wikipedia page, okay? And to do that, we also implemented the concept that I can follow stuff. You see in here, we have cantas and we have in there follow. If you click here, everything about this organization is going to appear in your feed, right? And to implement that, we used super.plone. So it's possible to follow categories, contributors, tags, people, and so on and so forth. And every time you do this, we go and add an entry to the super catalog. And when you unfollow, we remove the entry and so on. So we can even do some reports based on how people or users love to follow these organizations more than these other ones and so on and so forth. And the first approach I was considering was to implement a simple REST API to deal with that and save the data on a Postgres database. But Super was way easier to implement, especially because it's already in Plone. I do not need to wait a REST or a database call to get and say, okay, you are following already this page and so on. Also implemented, but did not release the voting up, like saying, oh, this card is relevant or not, and the bookmarking. So you can bookmark some cards. It's everything there. It's not on the user interface yet. And a few months ago, I stumbled with a problem that was, okay, every time I wanted to do something, like, for instance, I want to ping archive.org, the Wayback Machine, to store this page as soon as this card, as soon as the card is published, right? Trying to do that with Plone right now, first of all, I start doing stuff like that, simply adding to listening to some events and doing that synchronously. But archive.org is the greatest example of why that's not possible. So when you go and do that in archive.org, it takes something between 45 seconds to 60 seconds to ping you back. So it was clear that I would need some kind of a sync solution to do that. And the approach was to develop a special microservice, even though it's not a microservice because it's not so micro, but develop something that was going to run on a different process. And Plone would basically send a message like, do something. If it's synchronous, wait for the answer. Otherwise, do something and I don't care. So right now we have everything from translation, auto summary, archiving, and even that bridge to the DBpedia Spotlight implemented on this microservice that was developed with Fast API plus HTTPX. Okay. Of course, each endpoint has its own dependencies, Python dependencies. Ideally, we should have one microservice for each one of them. But as I'm using DigitalOcean's apps platform, every new service is going to cost us $5 a month, and we do not have a volume that justifies that. But the moment we decide to go for a Kubernetes scenario or even a bigger deployment, it's easy to do with this application because it's easy to basically split into smaller pieces. Some of the lessons learned during this, first of all, I have upgrade steps every time I need to deploy something. If there's a new code that changes configuration or needs something there, there's going to be an upgrade step. And over time, I added catalog indexes, I added information to the user schema profile and so on and so forth. And of course, always be aware of hash tree configuration stuff that you store in the hash tree, but you have the full value. Do not forget to add the purge bow equals false, because that already hurt me in the past. First thing, I would like to thank Philip Power and everyone else involved in the trainings, because right now the cloning training materials are the de facto documentation for Plone. It's the most updated one, even though from time to time I need to go back to the docs.plone.org. But most of the time, information that it's something I need to learn comes from training materials. I am going to do my 1 second of ranting here. I fucking hate research registry as it is today, and JS development and so on. I saw Andres Young mentioning in the past, he does everything already with Webpack and outside solution. I never got the time to probably understand research registries and how it works. It's working, but it's not ideal, but yeah, it's there. Plone likes now a simple and working async delay solution. Everything that we had in the past had the async name and it's gone. So it's something that if someone is willing to develop a new add-on, I would love to help. And be careful with WebP images, because they're not for everyone. Okay, that was a lesson I learned with the Thumbor, because Thumbor basically reads the request and say, okay, you support WebP, so I send you WebP, right? And I have Cloudflare in the front saying every image you basically cache. Then we had users with iPhones. So first time WebP, second time iPhone, people do not see the image. It was a pain in the ass. And as I preferred the benefit of the caching of Cloudflare to the idea of reducing a bit the size of image, so I queue WebP for us. Some future steps. First, contributions. We have this feature in beta for some users that you basically put the URL, we generate auto summary, and if it's in another language, we already translate and then generate the auto summary. It's going to be available for everyone. I'm considering implementing that either with React or Svelte. It's something I'm going to decide at the end of this conference. We are planning car threads, something like the Twitter threads, when you basically have a tweet that replies to a tweet and so on and so forth. Search improvements. We want to move to Elasticsearch. I've been saying that for a few months, never got the time. First time last week, I was able to play with it, and to move to rel storage, because right now we have a Zio setup. When we go out of beta, first quarter next year, we want to use Plone as a headless CMS, Voto, and mobile applications for Pendact. We want to implement more features in terms of quality control. So integrate language to do the basic of grammatic and spelling check. Do a bit of auto tagging, and something that I wanted to do before launching, but I was not able to. So, and this is an important part, that's basically user management. Right now it's using the user folder, and it's already getting slow and slow. We need to move away from this. And of course, join us, help us, contribute cards. Every card, we plant trees. And I would love to see you all there, helping us like Eric Behold does. And thank you, Eric. And that was it. Very, very glad to be here. I'm glad to have this Plone conference. Thank you all. I ask you to follow me on Twitter. It's Érico. Follow Pendact. It's Pendact HQ. If you want to get in touch, these are my contact information, Pendact information. And really important, my presentation is already on SpeakerDeck /EricoF/building a collaborative news platform with Plone. That was it. I'm going to join you all on the Jitsi pretty soon and answer your questions. It was a pleasure. See you soon.
Yes, thank you, Érico. As he mentioned, we will be on the face-to-face in Jitsi. So if you have any further questions or discussions, just meet us there. And yes, see you soon.